Hey everyone, today I want to talk about a book that changed my life, which is Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power. Now, I know that this book has a bit of a bad reputation amongst some people. It's it's one of those books that a certain kind of person is associated with liking. There's this whole class of thing that you'll see people saying if someone tells you that this is their favorite book or their favorite movie, it's a red flag, run away. People say that about Fight Club, people say that about The Joker, and people say that about 48 Laws of Power, The Prince, Art of War. And I get why they say those things because this book does kind of have this presentation that implies that it's going to teach you how to be kind of this amoral, power hungry, power seeking individual who's likely a sociopath. And yet, I want to be honest, which is that when I read this book around 2010, it changed my life in a good way, and it's helped me be a better person, which might seem strange to some people. And, right in the preface of the book, there is this bit about how honesty can be a blunt instrument. It can bloody more than it cuts. Meaning, and what I read that to mean is that by being perfectly honest, you will inevitably hurt and insult a great many people. Robert says some of whom will choose to injure you in return. No one will see your honest statement as completely objective and free from some personal motivation, and they will be right. And, it's just, again, I don't want to defend this book too much. I don't want to imply that I'm sure there are people out there who've read this book and then became even bigger assholes than they already were, right? And this book does have the capacity to do that. I think, I have a tweet somewhere about how all good heuristics, all great pieces of advice, they are like power tools. Like anything that's substantial, anything that can make a big difference can also be damaging or hurtful if you don't use it properly. And I think this book is kind of like that, in that, if you go into it looking for something to use as justification for being an asshole, you'll find it, and fuck you, right? But if you use it like I did, which is to try and understand how the world works. And I'm not saying that, this book is going to teach you how the world works. This book is one hypothesis or one set of hypotheses, and a pretty good set of hypotheses in my opinion, about how social dynamics work. And when I was 20 and I read this book, it opened my eyes to a whole bunch of things that I had not properly considered that had been manifest in my life. What I mean by that is there were things that I was doing or saying or being, thinking that it was right, or not thinking at all, meaning just I was going through my life the way I felt was right, or without thinking or feeling, just trying to survive. And I would get into all these problems, and I wouldn't entirely understand where these problems were coming from. Why was I having so much trouble? Why did I seem to upset people? Why did some of my friendships end horribly? Why did sometimes I end up my grammar is going all over the place. Why did I sometimes end up getting taken advantage of by people who I thought were gonna look out for my best interests? Whole bunch of things like that. And reading this book really helped me come to terms with those things. Now, the content page of this book, and really the kind of style of the book is written in this is a very distinctive style, and it's kind of similar to how the guys on The Red Pill, right? And it's kind of got this very you're this kind of you're the prince, or you're this agent of power, and so like it talks to you like you're a king or a prince in waiting, trying to be a king, or that kind of thing. And so it says things like conceal your intentions, always say less than necessary, win through your actions, never through your argument, and things like that. And so yeah, win through your actions, never through your argument. Law 9. That changed my life. I used to think that you could argue you could argue with people to persuade them to that your way is better. Meaning you consider your point of view, you consider their point of view, you try to explain to them how you see things, and then you try to persuade them from their point of view to your point of view. That sometimes works, and it's nice when it works, but it often doesn't. And nobody ever really sat me down and talked me through that and had me consider those things. And so this book was like a breath of fresh air for me, in that it let me consider things in a way that my family never talked to me about these things, my teachers never talked to me about these things. It's just kind of making sense of social dynamics, right? And yeah, there's stuff that sounds manipulative, like get others to do the work for you but always take the credit. That's not nice, right? That's kind of I would not say that, but you can learn from it. So that's Law 7, page 56. And I love how the book presents its ideas, which is it doesn't just it uses historical examples. So transgression and observance of the law. So for Law 7, get others to do the work for you but always take the credit. Robert talks about Tesla and Edison, where Tesla does all the work and Edison takes all the credit. And it's just sad. It's sad that Tesla died poor and weak, and nobody gave him credit for what he did. And even to this day, I think his legacy is still it's getting better, but it's still kind of slow. And when I read this, I don't think I should be like Edison. I should take advantage of other people. I don't want to do that. But I don't want to be Tesla either. I don't want to be some guy who gets taken advantage of. And so I find it helpful to read stories like this so that I can come to my own conclusions and think about the ways in which I might make mistakes and I might get things wrong, and how other people might manipulate me. And this has not made me kind of cynical or kind of constantly worried about the machinations of others. It has, by understanding how people are, or developing a hypothesis for how people are and testing that hypothesis, and then refining my models of human behavior and human nature, it's given me lightness. It's given me calm. Like I feel like I have a pretty good grasp of all of the ways in which someone could screw me over, and that lets me behave more comfortably, because I'm not worried that like something that's going to happen that I think is unlikely to happen is going to happen. Stuff like that. It's just it's very, you don't have to read this and become an asshole. You can read this to understand assholes better, and to understand how you might get misconstrued as an asshole. I think that happens to a lot of people. Particularly recently, I've been hearing from some of my friends who are autistic on Twitter, and they say things like, having autism is like you don't understand a lot of social rules, and so you ask questions about what the social rules are, and then people think you are fucked up for asking those questions. And like a book like this helps you consider what those rules maybe are, right? So it's infinite. It's not simple. You're not going to read this and then, wow, I understand people completely now and I don't need to do any more reading or research or study. Like this book is a starting point, and you may disagree with it even. So, and the cool thing is you can ignore the rules and just read the stories, because all the stories are historical. So Robert Greene, here's my kind of hot take. I think Robert Greene used the book 48 Laws of Power as a kind of a shiny container to talk about what he really wanted to talk about, which is history. And he's a student of history, and I can kind of recognize a fellow nerd, a fellow scholar. And if you read interviews with Greene, he's not a power hungry guy. He's like a book nerd who has a cat, and he's kind of soft spoken and shy, and well, I don't know if he's shy, but he's not a power seeking person. He's a student of power, and I kind of put myself mostly in that sphere, that framework, that frame, right? What else? Let me kind of just scan through. So there are 48 laws, right? And I highlighted like my favorite laws, or the laws that I felt I needed to learn. So win through your actions was law 9. That was one. Law 10. Avoid the unhappy and unlucky. That was very difficult for me because I used to be drawn to the unhappy and unlucky, and I think I still kind of am. What that means is, like you see someone who's being miserable, and then you kind of want to commiserate with their misery, and you can't save everyone, and if you surround yourself by people who need saving, there's a good chance that that their energy and the things that they talk about and all their anger, their depression, which isn't to blame any of them, which isn't to say anything negative about any of them specifically, but just the people you associate with influence your energy, influence your vibe, influence your mood, influence what you choose to think about, what you choose to do. And it took me like a decade to get away from people who are complaining all the time, upset all the time, frustrated all the time. And now on Twitter, for example, I have lots of kind, generous, optimistic friends, and it makes the quality of my life so much better. And I feel like reading something like this started to get me on the right track, sort of, for me. What else? There's one that's like so law 11, learn to keep people dependent on you. So again, I don't go into the world trying to get people to be dependent on me. But, if you dig into it, okay, so let's look at what the law says on page 82. Let's look at what the story is. Somewhere in the Middle Ages, it's about a soldier who gets beheaded. Is this in Venice? In Siena? Some guy saves the town, and the soldier saves the town, and they say, let us kill him and worship him as our patron saint. Ooh, that's kind of dark. Yeah, that's kind of bleak, right? Reality is bleak. And then that's an example of the law, a transgression of the law. And then there's like a observance of the law, which is, he talks about Bismarck and Prussia. And he talks about how Bismarck was made a minister in the king's cabinet. Why? Because he courted Friedrich William IV all day. Right-hand man to the emperor. People rarely act unless compelled to. I don't know. When I read this now, I don't feel so... here's an example of Henry Kissinger, who's a fucking war criminal. Henry Kissinger managed to survive the many bloodlettings that went on in the Nixon White House, not because he was the best diplomat Nixon could find, and not because him and Nixon got along so well, nor did they share their beliefs in politics. He survived because he entrenched himself in so many areas of the political structure that to do away with him would lead to chaos. So Kissinger's power was extensive. He got himself involved in so many aspects and departments of the administration that his involvement became a card in his hand. Now, Kissinger is a fucker. Like, if you read up about him, he's led to the deaths of tons of people. But, I find it good to understand what the fuck he did that led him do what he did. When you're gonna get screwed, it helps to know how you're getting screwed, right? Some people don't want to know. Some people would rather just pretend they're not getting screwed, or ignore it, or whatever. I like to know. So yeah, but really, so when I first read this when I was 20 years old, there were all kinds of things that really stood out to me. Like here I've starred this, and like the final line is, if you can make your assistance subtle and gracious rather than boastful and burdensome, your recompense will be that much more satisfying and powerful. And I wrote a note to myself, which is never talk about the favors that you've done for others, which was something I had to teach myself. I used to feel needy, and I used to feel like if I did someone a favor, I should remind them of it in case they forget. Which is a rather clingy thing to do, and like kind of selfish, kind of weak, and kind of nobody wants to be around a guy who reminds them of the favors that they've done. I didn't realize that. Reading this helped me realize that. So reading this helped me become a better person in a way. So I talk about this because I have hundreds of guys and girls in my DMs on Twitter asking me all kinds of questions, and I can't talk to every single person all the time, so I've started making content like videos and writing and blog posts and stuff, and I wanted to make this a video rather than a blog post because I wanted you to get to see how I act, right? You can see my body language, how I'm talking about this. If you want to be some kind of power hungry, sociopathic kind of control the world person, don't do that. Don't be that kind of person. You can't control the world, and everything is transient and fleeting, and there is no joy in conquering. It's just the only thing that really matters, in my opinion, is the respect you earn from people that you respect, the admiration, self-respect, admiring yourself, earning your own trust, and liking yourself, right? And being surrounded with other people that you like and respect and admire. And I found that reading this book with that perspective in mind, meaning I wanted to become a more gracious, understanding, supportive person. I wanted to be less of a burden. I wanted to be more graceful. I wanted to be less clunky and needy and selfish and ugly, in terms of how I behaved. I wanted to behave better, and this book helped me with that. And that's a truth. And I feel like I owe it to, I made a pact with my younger version of myself, which was nobody taught me this shit. I had to fucking read books and I gratitude to people who write books and artists and musicians, and these people kind of kept me alive when nobody else seemed to give a shit about me. And I made a pact with myself that I would help other people along. And so, if you're willing to consider me as some kind of let's just not say guru, but like someone who's just further along the journey, right? Who's kind of, and we've met at like a pit stop at like a tavern, right? And here's just me kind of helping you out a little bit if you are that younger version of myself. And kind of the only thing that I ask of you is that you use these powers for good. The universe is a vast and uncaring place full of desolation, and life is the light of human consciousness is this precious flicker in the darkness. And if you acquire power, right, social capital, financial capital, whatever it is, if you acquire leverage and you can use that to enact your will, right, consider using it to lift other people up and to empower other people. And you will find, I believe, which is what I have found, that serving others, serving good people in particular, right, finding other versions of yourself in the world and helping them out is extremely gratifying, fulfilling, and it's a good life. So that's all for my 48 Laws of Power review. I didn't, it is what it is. And thank you for listening. Take care.